Good morning, everyone. This is the final workshop or webinar on succession and the World's Week. I think it's important that we understand that the Guardians Fund's purpose is ultimately to ensure that the best interests of children are looked at after the death of their parents. And this is an important webinar because ultimately we all know that both women and children are disproportionately impacted by a range of issues, which includes death. And so today, I think it's today what we are going to do is to be able to speak about the fund. We have, we currently have the Deputy Master of the Free State, which is Zimkhitha Nhlapo. Thank you so much for coming to this particular webinar and actually speaking to us about the Guardians Fund and how to access it. And then I think Zimkhitha is currently, like I said before, the Deputy Master of the Free State, Master of the High Court. She obtained her LLB from the University of the Free State. She's also admitted attorney since 2004. And her work experience is that, you know, she's been at Legal Aid South Africa. She's been at the Master of the High Court in Cape Town, the Master of the High Court in Pretoria, as well as in Bloemfontein. So she's an admitted attorney with a master's degree in private law. And her key expertise focuses on deceased estates, on insolvencies, on trusts, curatorship, and also the Guardians Fund. And she's passionate about law, especially women's rights and empowerment, mainly due to the fact that women were previously regarded as perpetual minors, and they are still very vulnerable. She published Practical Challenges Relating to the Supervision of Small Estates, which is an article that was published in the Journal for Juridical Science, and that was in 2016. I'm going to hand over to Zimkhitha, but before that, I just also wanted to introduce Renee Carstens. So the way we have these webinars is that we will provide the particular input, and then thereafter, if there are any questions or any queries, Legal Aid South Africa has also offered their expertise, and Renee Carstens is the civil principal legal practitioner at the Cape Town local office of Legal Aid South Africa. She's been here before. And she's provided her particular input. And I just wanted to say thank you again, Renee, for availing yourself. She's also the head of the civil unit, which comprises of labor, estates, and civil litigation in both high and lower courts. And she's also heads a cluster within the Western Cape, Northern Cape provinces, comprising of 4 offices. In this role, she provides advice and guidance to other local officers in dealing with complex matters, in particular civil matters, and is responsible for also for training candidate attorneys and newly admitted attorneys. So she ultimately also ensures compliance and internal quality measures. So we have 2 phenomenal women that is here today, and to be able to ensure that we provide answers to all your queries. I'm going to hand over to you, Zimkhitha, now, and all the best for the presentation. Thank you very much. Zimkhitha, to you.
Thank you very much, ladies, for inviting me. Okay, can I proceed?
Yes, you may.
All right. Proceed. Okay, I'll start with the background. Yes, I'll start right there, the background, please. Slide number 2. Can you go to the next slide? Can I go to the next slide, please? Hello? What is going on here? Yes, that is the slide I was talking about. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, okay, let me proceed then. I will start with the background and explain it briefly. What is Guardians Fund all about? What is Guardians Fund? Guardians Fund is a trust fund that was created in terms of the Administration of Estates Act. And the main purpose of Guardians Fund is to safeguard the interests of the vulnerable. When it was created initially, it was there to protect mainly orphans after their parents have passed on. And then that was the main purpose Guardians Fund was created. Now we need to know exactly, as it is a trust fund, what kind of funds can the Guardians Fund deal with? We do not deal with all funds out there at all. There are certain funds which are prescribed in the Administration of Estates that we ought to administer. And those funds, most of the time, they either belong to minors, because generally minors are viewed as people who are unable to manage their financial affairs, and people who are mentally challenged, they are also unable to manage their own affairs. Also, unborn heirs. We also deal with monies for missing or absent persons, also limited interest like your usufruct or your fideicommission. But for the purposes of this presentation, I will focus mainly on the monies that are held by the Guardians Fund for minors and generally people who are unable to manage their own affairs. These monies, where do they come from? Generally, the monies that we hold in the Guardians Fund come from deceased estates, where, for example, the child has lost a parent or both parents. And in terms of the liquidation and the distribution account, there's a certain portion that is supposed to go to the minor child. But due to the fact that the child is unable to manage his or her own affairs, then the money will be deposited by the executor into the Guardians Fund. And we hold that money for the minor, and we also administer that money. By administering, I mean, obviously at times you find that kids are left with aunts and uncles who are unemployed and there is no source of income at all. And this child has monies that are being held by the Guardians Fund. So what will generally happen is that those people who are taking care of this minor child will have to apply to the master for any funds for the day-to-day maintenance of this minor child. Can I go to the next slide, please? Okay, I've already touched on the monies that we hold on behalf of these people. Next slide, please. Okay, I think I have been going fast because I have already touched on this as well. Can we go to the next one? Thank you very much. So the Guardians Fund has certain functions. Everything that is done in the Guardians Fund is according to the Act. There are specific sections that deal with the functions and everything else that is Guardians Fund. So even the duties that we do in the Guardians Fund are specified in the Administration of Estates Act. So the functions of the Guardians Fund, we receive these monies, whether they come from the deceased estate, or they come to us through a court order, because at times, let's say the parents, they divorce, and the court orders the Guardians Fund to receive the money for maintenance on behalf of this specific child. So we will receive those funds as well. And upon receiving those, we also have a duty to pay those monies out when they become claimable. We pay to the specific beneficiary, and we also pay to the guardians of these children when the money is not claimable, but that is only limited to allowance. And we also have to calculate interest on these funds. We invest these monies for these minors so that they can earn interest. Any money that we receive in the Guardians Fund has to receive interest. especially monies that we receive for the benefit of the minors. And this is exclusive of funds that are specifically for future maintenance that we receive in terms of court orders that are from the magistrate's offices. Those are not included. And then we have to safekeep these monies, and on an annual basis, when these funds that have not been claimed by the beneficiaries, we have to compile and publish a list during September in the Government Gazette of all funds that we are holding and that are claimable but have been unclaimed, so that those beneficiaries can check and have access and be in a position to claim for their funds. And we also have a function which is to pay the funds to the entitled person when the funds become payable to those people. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you very much. As I've already indicated, that the monies that we receive in the Guardians Fund will basically consist of monies, whether it's for known people or unknown people. One might ask, what do I mean by unknown persons? An unknown person is somebody who has, for example, a deceased passed on, he left a will, and he said, I'm leaving my assets to my children, and there's no specification as to who these children are. And probably he's leaving behind a surviving spouse who is currently pregnant, then that child falls under the category of unknown. And also, even if the person is specified in the will, but the person is missing, that person falls under that category because no one knows who this person is or where that person is currently. We also receive monies that are sent to us in terms of the other acts. For example, your insolvency funds that we receive when a company has gone under, and employees who are working for the company, the money will be paid over to us by the liquidators, and then they will have to claim their monies from us. And then we also receive, in terms of the court order, which I have already explained. Can I go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is just a small note to say that when we receive the monies, those monies, we are only holding them in the name of the person who the money belongs to. It will also give us an indication whether it's funds that ought to accrue interest or whether it's funds that are supposed to be allocated in a non-interest bearing account. Like I've already indicated that we receive monies in terms of, like, for example, insolvency acts, and those monies, they do not earn any interest. So when we receive them and we open the account in the name of the person, it also gives us as the master indication whether to allocate those funds in an interest bearing or a non-interest bearing account. Can I move to the next slide, please? The question there is, when are the funds claimable? When the child turns 18 in terms of the Children's Act, that child can claim the funds, unless the child also has a mental challenge. Then in that instance, even though the person has become a major, we will not be paying out the money due to the fact that the person is not in a position to manage his or her own affairs. We will also pay out the money if the will, for instance, has a restriction where it says, as much as the child has turned 18, these funds ought to be paid out only when the child turns 25. We will not pay the money out when the child becomes a major at 18. We will work with the will, and we will only pay out on the specified age that is reflected on the will. If the will says 25, then we will only pay out the monies when the child turns 25. If there is a court order that says pay this money at a specific period, then we have no option but to comply with the court order. Also, in an instance where we have received monies for the beneficiary who is currently a minor and that minor passes away, then that money will have to be paid out now because the person it belonged to is deceased. The executor who has been appointed for that specific estate will have to claim the money from the guardian's fund. When the person marries, obviously a minor, when they get married, they are no longer regarded as minors, but as majors by virtue of marriage. So we will have to pay out, even though the person is still under 18 years. But now that she or he is married, we will have to pay out those monies. And there are certain events as well that the master will look into and see whether the discretion plays a major role there, but it does not work in most cases. It's very limited cases where that can take place. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, like I have already indicated that funds in the Guardian's Fund, they earn interest, but not all funds that we receive in the Guardian's Fund earn interest. Monies that we receive on behalf of minors, they earn interest, which is currently at 5%. Unfortunately, we also are feeling the effect of COVID. Prior to COVID and lockdown, we were above 8% in terms of our interest rate, but yeah, it fell to 5%. So currently our interest rate is at 5%. So any person who is also unable to manage his or her own affairs, for example, a major person who is mentally challenged, but in terms of the court order, or maybe due to the fact that the funds were not enough to justify the appointment of a curator bonus, because curator bonus, you have to pay curator bonus for the administration, and in the Guardian's Fund you do not pay any money for the administration of the funds. So it happens at times that the court will order that the Guardian's Fund must receive these funds and not go to a trust and not go to a curator bonus. So when we receive those monies for somebody who is a major but who is lacking capacity to manage own affairs in terms of a court order, then those funds will be allocated into an interest-bearing account. Unborn heirs, obviously it's unborn, falls under the category of a minor, automatically earns interest. And then where there is a limited interest, like in your usufruct or fiduciary, those will earn interest as well. Because, for example, in the case of a fiduciary, we know that the asset must stay there as it is until it goes to the next beneficiary. So the person who has that limited interest has the right to apply and to claim the interest earned on the capital, or according to the terms of the will. Can we move to the next slide, please? Now, here the question comes in terms of when will the master pay? The master does not pay automatically. In terms of the act, the master will only pay when the person becomes entitled to the money. Then we pay the money to the specific person. Like in any financial institution, there will be hawks hovering around that are trying to take chances. We're really struggling with tracing agents who are targeting beneficiaries and are claiming exorbitant percentages for doing work that the actual beneficiary could have done himself or themselves without having any sort of assistance with anyone. So we try by all means to bring it to their attention that all the work that is done by the Guardian's Fund is free. No one has to pay anyone for anything that is done in the Guardian's Fund. And if you decide as a beneficiary to make use of a tracing agent, you are doing that out of your own accord, out of your own will. But you have to know that they will take 10, sometimes 20% of the total amount that you have in the Guardian's Fund. Sometimes they might help somebody who doesn't know that they have money in the Guardians Fund. But at times they even go to people who know that they have money. It's just that maybe they don't know how to go about applying for that money. Information which they would have received if they had gone to a magistrate's court, the deceased is the estate section, for example, and went to inquire in terms of how do I go around applying for this money. So most beneficiaries, they lose their money through tracing agents because maybe they don't know how do they go about claiming their monies. Can we move to the next slide, please? As I've indicated in the previous slide, that the master shall, upon application by the entitled person, only the entitled person has the right to claim for the money. We do not make it, the beneficiary has reached the age of majority, we will pay directly to that specific beneficiary. If that beneficiary is deceased, we will pay directly to the executor or the master's representative who is appointed to handle that specific estate. If the beneficiary is still a minor, but they need assistance with the day-to-day maintenance of the minor child, and the child is staying with a grandma, then the grandma may apply to the master for allowance, may apply for education, for clothes, things of that nature, and the master may consider those. We pay on a quarterly basis. It differs in terms of each and every office depending on how much workload they have. For instance, I know of the Guardians Fund in Kimberley, they pay on a month-to-month basis. Guardians Fund in Cape Town and Bloemfontein, they pay on a quarterly basis. And then you have your Guardians Fund in Pretoria, which I believe they pay annually, once off on an annual basis. So it differs per office. But we will pay for your maintenance, and we will also pay, for instance, where the child has enough money and the specific requirements that the guardian has to comply with or to provide the master with before the master can consider buying immovable property. But we do buy immovable property that will be registered in the name of the minor child. In all these payments, the Act does not allow us to exceed payment of 250,000 from the capital. If we can see that, okay, we are almost to reaching 250 from the capital, then the master will have to approach the court and ask the court to give us permission to proceed to pay maintenance and education for this minor child, even though we are about to exceed this money. So the court, most of the time, they will give us the order to say continue and pay, because this child has to live on something and this child has money in the master's office. What am I leaving out here? Oh, obviously, this limit of 250,000 does not apply to the investment in immovable property. So the master can approve buying immovable property for the minor child, even though the value thereof exceeds the 250,000 rand. But we cannot pay the day-to-day maintenance and education and everything else and exceed 250,000 without the court sanctioning it. Can I move to the next slide, please? In fact, before I move to the next slide, I saw that I've left something out from my slides. One will then ask the question, how does one claim from the Guardians Fund? The process of claiming from the Guardians Fund is straightforward, and it's available on the Justice website. Each and every magistrate's court, if you go to their estate section, they will be in a position to assist you with the procedure of claiming from the Guardians Fund. there is a form that is called a J314. That is the form that we utilize for payment of allowances, which include but are not limited to maintenance, education of the child, school uniforms, transportation to school and from school. And then we have a form called a J251, which you will use when you have reached the age of majority, and now you are claiming for your entire money, your capital, including your interest. Then you fill in that form called the J251. And then there will be certain attachments, documents that you have to attach to the actual application. For instance, in your J341, the guardian will have to indicate to us in terms of any other forms of monies that the person receives. For example, we know that if the person is a foster parent, they received a certain amount from SASSA, and then that information will inform the assistant masters in the guardians fund in making a decision as to how much should the guardians fund pay the guardian, either on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis, towards the maintenance of the child. And then you will have to attach also certified copies of the birth certificate of the child, of the ID of the person who is applying for the funds. There is also a fingerprint verification, which used to be done at Home Affairs, but now we have a system that is called MoveIt that is linked to Home Affairs. So we are able to verify the beneficiaries in our own offices, and the specific service points, your magistrates court, which also have the service of MoveIt, but it's not available in every magistrates court in the country. There's certain ones that are already connected to Home Affairs, so they will be in a position to assist you with that. One will then ask, where do I claim for my funds? There are monies that we receive in the Guardians Fund from GEPF. GEPF, for example, they would look at if the person who is deceased submitted a nomination form for his or her beneficiaries with the addresses and stuff, they will look at where is the guardian of this child residing. Then they will deposit that money in the guardians fund that is closer to the person. But at times you will find out that the money, even though the beneficiary and the guardian are residing in the Free State, GEPF paid the money over to the Pretoria Master's Office, for example. Now, that means that you cannot claim your money from the Bloemfontein office, because the Bloemfontein office does not hold the funds for you, but the Pretoria office does. You can just submit your application to the Bloemfontein office, and the Bloemfontein office will forward your application to the Guardians Fund in Pretoria for the processing and the payment of your claim. Which is what we do currently when it comes to your magistrates offices. They act as service points for us. Clients go there, they submit their applications, and then the magistrates court, they will forward the applications to us for processing. Can we move to the next page, please? This slide basically talks about the previous slide, please. Can we go to the previous slide? Thank you. This slide talks to what I have already highlighted, that each and every year in March, we have to prepare and publish a list of funds. Next slide, please. A list of funds which are in the Guardians Fund, which are claimable but have not been claimed. And these are advertised in the Government Gazette. One might ask a question, why the Government Gazette? Why not the local newspaper? Unfortunately, that is what Section 91 currently tells us, and we have no option but to comply with what the Act is saying. as much as we know that most people, especially our clients, they do not even have access to the Guardians Fund, to the government gazette, which is where now your tracing agents will infiltrate, because they have access to the government gazette, and they be in a position now to see these beneficiaries and target them and make them sign forms where they are saying that they are going to pay them 20 to 30% fees for hooking them up with the Guardians Fund, or for helping them to fill the form and submitting the application to the Guardians Fund. Can we move to the next slide, please? The next one, please. And in all the monies that we keep in the Guardians Fund, can you go to the previous one, please? If funds remain unclaimed in the Guardians Fund for a period of 30 years, and even though the master has advertised in the government gazette, those funds, they still remain unclaimed, then that money will be forfeited to the state. Then it goes to National Treasury. Let's say you become aware after 30-year period has lapsed that you had money in the Guardians Fund. Can you claim the money now? Unfortunately, you cannot. Once the money is paid off to National Treasury, you will not be in a position to get it back. I believe that is the last slide, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.
Zimkita, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for everything that you've done, and also the information. I hope that the information is going to help at least one person on this webinar. We will also be recording and then putting this particular information on the Facebook, so that more people can be assisted. So thank you again, Zimkita. If there's any questions, both Renee and yourself, what I'll just, Renee, I don't know if you've seen the chat. There's a few questions, and I don't know whether or not you, I don't know, both want to address it. The first one is, can an attorney be appointed to administer funds on behalf of a mentally disabled person in his trust account? Can the person be assisted by a guardian even when one has reached age of majority? I'll hand over to you.
Okay, yes, I think that is kind of a two-part question, and the first one, obviously an attorney can be appointed. It is however a question that you will have to apply for an appointment as a curator on behalf of that person with the not mentally capable to dealing with their own affairs. So it is a High Court application that will be brought, and an attorney or a family member can then be appointed on behalf of that person to administer their funds and their property. So I'm not sure whether that answers Pat's question. The second one, if we can maybe just have a look there again. Well, the second one is, can you be assisted by a guardian even when one has reached age of majority? Obviously, at the moment you reach the age of majority, which is 18, you don't need the assistance of your guardian anymore. So you can act on your own behalf and deal with your own monies that is kept in the trust, the Guardians Fund, on your behalf. So Pat, I hope that answers your question. I see you have raised some more questions. I'm just going to go through them as I go. I think the next one is, someone left me funds when I was still a minor. How will I know that? How will I know that? As far as I know, and maybe Zimkita can come in here as well, the Guardians Fund is able to check on your ID document whether there is any monies kept on your behalf in any estate. Or if you have a reference to an estate where you think that someone might have left you money, you can also check on the estate number. But I think if you do have an ID number and someone has left you funds in the Guardians Fund, they will be able to trace it like that. Maybe Zimkita can just clarify this.
Zimkita, do you
No,
also
it's as you are saying it, Renee. Sorry, it is as Renee is saying, the Guardians Fund will be in a position to check for you using your ID number or the ID number of the deceased if the money came from a deceased estate. Even if the money came from an insolvent estate, that matter, any person with the ID number can go to the Guardians Fund. But the thing is, when it comes to the Guardians Fund, if you go to the Bloemfontein Guardians Fund, for example, they will only be in a position to inform you of what they have for their specific office. So that will mean if you are not certain in which Guardians Fund the money was deposited, you will then have to contact all 6 different offices.
Thank you, Zimkita. I'm going to this now. Another question,
you.
which is around what is the meaning of usufructuary, of fiduciary, or fiduciary monies from the fund invested with the PIC? We must, I think maybe this is just definitional. Maybe if you can just start explaining what all of those definitions mean.
Yes. I think as well, I think the questions are kind of going one into each other. So I also got what is the meaning of a usufructuary? That is just a right that someone leaves you to use someone's property. So you will never become the owner of that property, but you may use it up to a point where you may not destroy it, if I can explain it like that. So if someone leaves you a property, you can stay there. If it's a farm, you can use the fruits thereof, but you cannot sell that property or give it to someone else. So that's just a use of property of someone that is left to you. A fideicomissum is a legal institution where the owner of the property transfers his property to another person on condition that it is transferred to someone else. So if I can explain it like that, your father leave a property to his firstborn on the condition that it is then left to your firstborn. So it's a provision that, so in a will, you make provision that the property is initially or finally left to someone else. I hope I'm explaining it that you can understand, Pat. You can maybe just make another note if it's unclear. So it's just that I leave you something on condition that you leave it to specific someone else. So it will also not become your final property. You will have to leave it to someone and bequeath it to someone else. So a fiduciary is when a person or an organization acts on behalf of another person, and where you put that client of yours interest before your own. So it's a duty that you have to preserve good faith and trust. So you just deal with someone's property on their behalf with the utmost faith and trust. So I hope that clears it up. I think the next question that you posted, Pat, was monies from the fund invested with the PIC were mismanaged. Is this true? Maybe Zimkita can take that one.
Unfortunately, I can't talk into that mismanagement of funds at the PIC. As far as I'm aware, all the monies that the Guardians Fund has invested is still there. Thank you.
Okay. Then the next one, if I read it correctly, is it true that can the beneficiaries, if not claim their funds to the state? I think Zimkita dealt with this in her presentation as well. So if you do not claim the benefit that is left for you in the Guardians Fund, it will be forfeited after 30 years. So I'm sure that answers that question. The next one that I can see is, can I bequeath fixed property to a minor?
Renee?
Yes. Yes, Zimkita?
I just wanted to highlight something. Somebody might ask, is 30 years from what? The period of 30 years is calculated from the date on which the funds or the money became claimable, but has remained unclaimed. That is how the 30-year period is calculated.
Okay. Pat, I'm sure that answers your question. Then I see the next one that you've asked is, can I bequeath fixed property to a minor? Yes, you can leave your fixed property, so immovable property, to a minor child. That would obviously be administered and after by the guardian appointed for that minor, or the parent of that child. But nothing prevents you from leaving fixed property or immovable property to a minor. I see the next question is, what is a government gazette? It's where you it's like a newspaper where certain things are advertised, which specifically related to notices in terms of deceased estates or insolvencies. Maybe Zimkita can give a better, clearer description of a government gazette.
Renee, actually, it's exactly what you are saying it is. It's a publication of government information. That's all I can say. It's more like a newspaper, like we have said, where things like people who have passed on, the adverts for your deceased estates, your adverts for your liquidations and insolvencies, your adverts for the monies that are in the Guardians Fund are published. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, then I see there's on the chat, there's also how many people are owed by the fund and how much is available presently in figures from the fund. How are beneficiaries traced? What are the banking details of the Guardians Fund? Maybe Zimkita, you can just answer that one on for Pat.
In terms of the amount that the fund holds, I cannot divulge that information. We all know the fraudsters are out there, unfortunately. And the number of people that the fund is holding monies for, I can't from the top of my head tell you how many people are beneficiaries in the Guardians Fund. And the other question was the banking details of the Guardians Fund. Each and every office, they have their own account. And unfortunately, I can't share the banking details because institutions out there, they have a tendency of dumping money into the Guardians Fund and not provide us with the supporting documents to make the proper allocations. And we end up being in a position where we can't even return the money to the sender because we don't know who deposited the money. And our suspense account balloons like crazy, and every year we are faced with audit queries regarding our suspense account. So unless you have funds that you want to deposit in the Guardians Fund, you have to contact that specific Guardians Fund, tell them you have funds, specify who are these funds for, so that the Guardians Fund can decide whether these are funds that we ought to receive in terms of the Act. And then if it's monies that we ought to administer, then we will give you the banking details and a reference number that you are supposed to utilize when you are making the transfer or the deposit into the Guardians Fund. Thank you, Renee.
Thanks, Zimkita. Siham, I see you are also typing on the chat at the moment. I don't see any other questions. Is there maybe further questions from any of the participants?
I don't see any other questions also coming through. I think both, the presentations as well as the information that has been provided through the chats was sufficient. And I do think that if people do have any queries, they can go on the website of the Department of Justice, also on the Masters, which also has information around the Masters office. And then also we have Legal Aid South Africa. If there are any legal advice that they require, they can also contact Legal Aid South Africa. So I think, Renee, maybe if you can also just explain to the various persons that is on this webinar, what is the purpose, also what is it that Legal Aid South Africa does to be able to support young children in relation to and how to access the Guardians Fund.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Legal Aid South Africa has a cooperation agreement with the Master of the High Court. So where we administer deceased estates where minor children are beneficiaries. So anyone can apply or will be referred from the Master's office to our offices if there are minor beneficiaries involved, and we will deal with the administration process. Once the administration of the estate has been finalized, we will also pay the monies over to the Guardians Fund with the specific references, as Mkita also mentioned. And the guardians of those children can then claim from the Guardians Fund. So we deal with the whole administration process. It is mostly where the estates are smaller than 250,000 Rand, but we do have also an exclusion where if there is an immovable property to the value of 500,000, we can also administer that. So we are mostly appointed as, in terms of Section 18.3, that is a letter of authority that we will receive from the Master's office, but we are also appointed as executors in the estate where the value of the estate exceeds the 250,000. The estate departments in our offices are with our units like Cape Town. So it's our bigger offices and is located where Master's offices are. So what normally happens is that when you have when there's a deceased estate, you will report it to the Master's office, who will provide you with the necessary forms and a referral letter to our offices, and we will take the process from there, arrange a consultation. If you are from outlying areas, you can also apply at any of our offices, local offices in the area, and they will refer it to our office in Cape Town where our unit is. So that is how we also assist to ensure that the minor beneficiaries' funds or inheritance are protected. And like I said, we will pay to the Guardians Funds once all debts are paid, or if need be, we will use also funds to transfer properties in the names of minor beneficiaries. So that is how Legal Aid is also involved in the administration process, and we work also closely with the Guardians Fund in securing minor beneficiaries' inheritance.
Thank you, Renee. Just for now, I mean, there's no more questions unless both, I don't know, Zimkita, if there's anything else that you want to maybe just say to the participants, or in Renee, then I will do the vote of thanks. I don't know if there's anything else that you want people to know on how to access the Guardians Fund.
Nothing further from my side, Sian,
one thing that comes to mind is, okay, sorry, Renee. One thing that comes to mind is that I need to bring it to the attention of the people out there that nationally we have 15 Master's offices, and out of those offices, only 6 offices provide the function of the Guardians Fund. So, for example, if you are based in Mpumalanga or in the Northwest, there is no Guardians Fund in those provinces, but you can still go to either the Magistrates Court in that province or the Master's office in that province and submit your application, and then it will be forwarded to the respective Guardians Fund office, which will then process your application for you. Thank you, Sayem.
Thank you, Zimkita. And then now just thank you, Zimkita. Thank you, Renee. And thank you to all the organizations that partook in all of these particular webinars. We pulled it off in literally in 2 months. And I just want to be, I'm really grateful to Legal Aid South Africa, Department of Justice, to all the progressive organizations that form part of it. The Women's Legal Center, in partnership with South African Women in Dialogue, the Law Society of South Africa, the Black Lawyers Association, the National Association of Democratic Lawyers, Legal Aid South Africa, the South African Women Lawyers Association, and then we have an organization called, a young organization called Sister-in-Law, as well as the Department of Constitutional Development, all came together in a broad network to be able to ensure that these webinars are brought to communities so that they, at the end of the day, can access the services of the masters. In addition to that, it is also in this particular week, there will also be Legal Aid South Africa and various attorneys are providing free legal advice and free drafting of wills. I'm not clear whether or not Legal Aid South Africa, whether or not you're also part of providing free legal services, but they can also attend at Legal Aid South Africa. And I do think maybe the master's offices will also have details of where people can go to be able to access the services of a lawyer, to be able to ensure that they do their draft their particular will. So, and we are also calling upon lawyers, practitioners to support the call of Legal Aid South Africa to register and provide free legal services during this particular week, so that people can access it on a pro bono basis, as well as and to be able to ensure that their wills or even estates that have not been dissolved for many years can be sorted out by the particular attorney or even the master or even Legal Aid South Africa. All of these webinars will be made available on the various websites and social media of different organizations. And once again, I want to say thank you so much for availing yourself.
Thank you, Siam. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.